A rat in the ship. I looked closely, and it was the smallest dragon I've ever seen. Rebecca wiped the grease from her hands onto her already stained coveralls, squinting at the flickering panel in the cargo bay of the Helios Dawn. The freighter had been making strange noises for the past 3 shifts, and as the ship's engineer, it was her job to figure out why before Captain Jakar decided to space her for incompetence. Probably just rats, Caden had said earlier, leaning against the doorframe of her quarters with that infuriating smirk of his. He was the navigator, all clean uniforms and perfectly groomed hair, while she spent her days elbow-deep in the ship's guts. "There are no rats in space, Caden," she'd replied, not looking up from her diagnostic pad. "Then explain the scratching sounds in the ventilation system." She couldn't. That was the problem. Now, crouched beside a thermal vent in the cargo hold, Rebecca heard it again, a distinct scrabbling like tiny claws on metal. She grabbed her flashlight and aimed it into the grate. 2 luminescent eyes stared back at her, unblinking. "Gotcha," she whispered, reaching for the maintenance tool to pry open the vent cover. The creature inside hissed, and Rebecca jerked backward as a small plume of flame, actual flame, shot from the darkness. Her heart hammered as she processed what she'd just seen. Fire in a pressurized spacecraft. That was impossible, unless... She leaned closer, this time more cautiously, and the light caught the creature fully. It was no larger than her hand, covered in iridescent scales that shimmered between deep crimson and burnished gold. Wings, translucent and delicate as gossamer, were folded against its serpentine body. A long tail whipped back and forth, and when it opened its mouth to hiss again, she saw rows of needle-sharp teeth. "You've got to be kidding me," Rebecca breathed. "A dragon, an actual dragon." Caden didn't believe her, of course. "Rebecca, you've been breathing recycled air too long," he said when she dragged him down to the cargo bay an hour later. "There's no such thing as dragons. They're Earth mythology, fantasy, fiction." "Then explain that," she said, pointing to the small creature now perched on top of a storage crate, grooming its scales with a forked tongue. Caden's jaw dropped. He stood frozen for a full 10 seconds before finding his voice. "What? How? Where did it come from?" "I don't know, but it's been living in our vents. Probably came aboard during our last supply run at Kepler 442b. Rebecca approached slowly, extending her hand. The dragon tilted its head, regarding her with what she could only describe as curiosity. "The question is, what do we do with it?" "We tell the captain," Caden said immediately. "Are you insane? Jakar will have it killed or sold to some collector. You know how the Draxians are about unauthorized life forms." The dragon chirped, a sound surprisingly melodic, and hopped onto Rebecca's outstretched palm. It was warm, almost hot to the touch, and she could feel the rapid beating of its tiny heart. "It trusts you," Caden observed, his expression softening. "Humans have a way with animals. Even mythical ones, apparently." She smiled as the dragon curled up in her palm, tucking its wings close to its body. "I'm keeping it." "You can't keep a dragon on a spaceship, Rebecca. It breathes fire." "Small fires, and only when startled." She gently stroked the creature's head with one finger, and it made a purring sound. "Look at it, Caden. When was the last time anything in this universe trusted a human on first contact? The Draxians barely tolerate us. The Zenthari think we're primitive. Even the AI systems treat us like we're one firmware update away from extinction." Caden sighed, running a hand through his hair. "You're going to get us both fired." "Probably." She grinned. "But think about it. Humans discover the first actual dragon in the galaxy. How very HFY is that?" They named her Ember. Over the following weeks, Rebecca kept the dragon hidden in her quarters, fashioning a small nest from thermal blankets and spare insulation. Ember, it turned out, had a voracious appetite for the ship's protein rations and an uncanny ability to sense danger. When a plasma relay nearly overloaded in the engine room, Ember had screeched and clawed at Rebecca's door until she investigated. The dragon had saved the entire ship. Caden became an unlikely co-conspirator, sneaking extra food and helping to cover for Rebecca when Captain Jakar made his rounds. The navigator had always prided himself on following regulations, but there was something about the tiny dragon that had wormed its way past his defenses. "You know," he said one evening, watching Ember chase a ball of crumpled foil across Rebecca's floor, "I've been thinking about what you said, about humans and first contact." "Yeah?" Rebecca looked up from the fuel consumption report she was supposed to be filing. "Every species we've encountered in space has been bigger, stronger, more technologically advanced. The Draxians conquered half the galaxy before we even invented the wheel. But humans, we made friends with wolves when we were still living in caves. We domesticated everything from horses to honeybees. We saw potential allies where others saw threats or tools." Rebecca smiled. "We're really good at making friends with things that could kill us." "Exactly." Caden knelt down and Ember immediately bounded over to him, climbing up his arm to perch on his shoulder. "Maybe that's our strength. Not weapons or faster ships or better AI. Maybe it's our ability to find connection in the strangest places, to look at a dragon in a ventilation shaft and see not a pest or a commodity, but a friend." Ember chirped and nuzzled against Caden's cheek, leaving a small scorch mark on his collar that he didn't seem to notice. When the Helios Dawn docked at Proxima Station 3 months later, Rebecca and Caden made a decision. They resigned from Captain Jakar's crew, pooled their savings, and bought a small courier ship. The registration listed 2 human operators and 1 emotional support lizard. As they lifted off into the black, Ember perched on the dashboard between them, her scales catching the light of distant stars. Rebecca couldn't help but laugh. "A rat in the ship," she said. "That's what I thought you were." Ember chirped indignantly, puffing out a small smoke ring. "She's right," Caden added with a grin. "You're much too dignified to be a rat." In the vastness of space, where humans were still newcomers and often underestimated, a tiny dragon slept peacefully between 2 friends who had proven once again that humanity's greatest strength wasn't in matching the power of other species. It was in seeing wonder where others saw only obstacles, and finding family in the most unexpected places. That, perhaps, was the most human thing of all.